A perfect YouTube hook starts with one impossible moment and keeps raising the stakes. And this story does exactly that. A new nurse is thrown out of a trauma bay, saves a dying soldier anyway, hears him call her by a secret name, and then watches a powerful colonel arrive before he can fully talk. From that point on, the hospital becomes a chessboard of lies, timing, and escape, where every reveal feels bigger than the one before it.
The chart slapped against the steel tray. Reynolds's finger shot out, aimed right at Lena. His voice was pure ice. "Get her out of here! A boot isn't touching my patient." The ensuing silence was absolute. No pulse, no pressure. The monitors screamed the grim reality. The team was out of moves. They were about to lose a soldier to the cold tile, not the hot sand. The moment Lena Foster entered Metro Health, her focus was a laser. She walked past the memorial plaques and the sterile government-issue decor. Hitching her pack, she checked her watch 0654, 6 minutes early, and located the main desk. The new post was the least of her worries. A younger nurse, Sarah, looked up, her eyes going wide before she offered a weak smile. "You must be Lena, the new transfer?" "I am." Sarah slid an ID badge toward her. "Welcome. Dr. Reynolds is the trauma chief, and he's on the warpath." "How bad?" Sarah's voice dropped to a whisper. "He made a resident cry before 0800 last week. Keep your head down. Don't try to be a hero. That's the only way to survive him." Lena clipped the badge to her scrubs. The ER at Metro Health was a constant storm. It was the hub for 3 counties of active duty personnel, their families, and a legion of veterans. It treated injuries most civilian doctors only read about, from IED blasts to the unseen scars of PTSD. The organized chaos was merely background static to Lena. She moved through the morning with a detached precision, logging vitals, updating charts, and fielding questions with an unshakable calm. A senior nurse named Marcus watched her for 20 straight minutes before finally approaching. "You've been in the thick of it before," he said. A statement, not a question. "Been where?" she asked, her attention fixed on an IV bag. "This, the whole damn show. You carry yourself like you've worn the uniform." "I had good teachers," she replied. Marcus met her gaze, gave a slow nod, and walked away. There was an intensity to Lena Foster that just ended conversations. By noon, they had processed 14 patients. A couple fractures, 1 burn case, 2 head injuries. A slow day. Then the radio crackled. Lena was charting when the call came through. She heard it first. Medivac inbound, multiple GSWs, convoy ambush, ETA is 11 mics. She put down the chart and started for the trauma bay. Marcus intercepted her. "New transfers stay clear of the bay their first week. It's the SOP. I read the SOP. Then you're on triage. Here." He stared her down. "Roger." She didn't move, but her eyes were fixed on the bay doors. The chopper landed in 9 minutes. The bay ignited in a controlled frenzy. Doctors moved with purpose. Nurses called for blood units, and residents worked to manage the influx. 6 casualties were wheeled in, 4 were in rough shape, 2 were already circling the drain. Lena directed the incoming wounded with a calm, almost chilling efficiency. She saw it all. The private in the second bay, whose stoic expression hid searing pain. The corpsman with the 1,000-yard stare that screamed TBI long before any test could confirm it. She flagged both of them without being asked. Another gurney burst through the doors. The medic's voice was shredded. He coded twice on the bird. "We got him back, but his BP has been in the toilet for 20 mics. GSW to the chest. A sucking wound, major bleeder." A young corpsman with blood-soaked gloves spoke to the first doctor he saw. "He's a SEAL, Special Warfare, Gunnery Sergeant Jack Harris." The trauma team swarmed the gurney. Dr. Reynolds was already there. his command forged in 3 decades of warfare. He snapped out orders, pointed, and never asked a single question. Lena found herself drawn toward the bay, a space she was forbidden to enter. Her assigned station was 30 feet away, yet some instinct pulled her closer. Her focus on the man on the gurney was absolute. Even unconscious, Gunnery Sergeant Harris was built like a brick wall. But his skin had a deathly grey pallor, and his breathing was a shallow, ragged effort, a clear sign his chest seal was failing. Then she saw it, the subtle shift in his neck, the tracheal deviation. A tension pneumothorax was killing him, and it was doing it faster than the bullet. "His pressure is cratering," someone shouted. 70/40. "Get another unit of O-neg," Reynolds ordered. "X-ray? 2 mics. We don't have 2. Probe, now." Lena slipped into the room, stopping just inside the doorway. She saw the ultrasound wand on Jack's chest. She saw Reynolds curse under his breath. She saw the resident staring, paralyzed, at the monitor. Then she watched the screen draw a single, final, flat line. "No perfusion," Reynolds grunted. His heart's failed. "Thoracotomy?" the resident stammered. "Not yet." A high-pitched alarm shrieked through the room. "He's in V-fib!" What happened next was practiced mayhem. The paddles whined. "Clear!" A jolt rocked the gurney. Then another. The flat line jumped to a faint, chaotic rhythm. It bought them seconds, not a life. "Hit him again," Reynolds ordered, his voice frayed. Everyone in that room was an expert. Lena could see their skill, and she could see the one thing they were all missing. The 2 thoughts ripped through her. 60/30, a nurse yelled out. "We are losing him." Reynolds said nothing. When he finally spoke, his voice was hollowed out. "Prepare to call it. Get cardiology and page the chaplain." That last word was a death sentence. A heavy silence descended on the bay. Lena crossed the line. She saw Jack Harris, his chest rising and falling in a way that was fundamentally wrong. She saw his slack hands, the monitor ticking away his final seconds. And she felt something she hadn't felt in years. It wasn't fear. It was a cold, razor-sharp purpose. It was absolute certainty. "He's not dead yet," she said. Her quiet words cut through the room like a scalpel. 3 people turned, Reynolds among them. He glared, his face like stone. "Who in the hell are you?" "Lena Foster. New transfer. And you are not supposed to be in here. Out. Sir, with all due respect, his trachea is deviated. You're missing a tension pneumothorax. I said out." His voice was a whip crack. "Now, get her out of my trauma bay. I will not have a boot touching my patient." No one moved. It wasn't defiance. Her complete composure was more commanding than his rage. Reynolds took a step toward her. That was not a request. "Leave now, or I will have the MPs escort you from this hospital." "Copy?" Lena's gaze flickered from him to Jack and back again. "His trachea has shifted. He has a tension pneumo on his left side. In 90 seconds, his heart will stop permanently." Her voice was like forged steel. "So you can have me removed, or you can check his chest. You do not have time to do both." A tense silence choked the room. Reynolds was vibrating with fury. The resident beside him was in shock. Marcus stood frozen in the doorway like a statue. A new, piercing alarm broke the standoff. "Pressure is down to 50, the nurse cried out, her voice cracking. For a heartbeat, Reynolds was perfectly still, then he snatched a decompression needle and shoved it at Lena. "If you botch this," he hissed, "your career is finished." She took it and moved to Jack's left side, her hands perfectly steady. They were always steady. She located the intercostal space by touch, aimed, and pushed. The hiss of escaping air was loud and sudden. On the monitor the blood pressure began to rise, first slowly, then with purpose. 60, 70, 75. The entire room held its breath. Lena stepped back, setting the needle on a tray. Jack's laboured breathing started to deepen and even out. The ashen colour began to recede from his skin. He was still on a razor's edge, still bleeding internally, his life hanging by a single thread. But he was stable. "Foster," Reynolds said, his voice cutting through the new quiet. She met his gaze. He paused. "Stay." And so she stayed. For the next 40 minutes she integrated with the team as if she had been there for years. She never questioned Reynolds, but when she saw an issue, she addressed it, and each time she was correct, adjusting a pressure drip, calling for a slight tilt to improve blood flow. She even repacked a chest wound that a field medic had clearly messed up. The resident, a young doctor named Evans, watched her with open admiration. "Where did you learn how to do that?" he asked in a brief lull. "In the field," Lena answered, her voice void of any emotion. "What field?" She gave no response. 42 minutes after she had walked into the bay, Jack Harris was holding on. He wasn't safe, he needed a surgeon and a great deal of luck. But his heart had a strong rhythm, his pressure was holding, and colour had returned to his face. Reynolds backed away from the table. He peeled off his bloody gloves, his eyes shifting from the patient to the woman standing opposite him. His rigid expression had fractured. What lay beneath was not anger. "Clear the bay," he commanded. The team started to filter out, the adrenaline crash making their limbs feel heavy. Marcus went with them, giving Lena a final, questioning glance from the doorway. When they were alone, Reynolds walked over to her, stopping just 2 feet away. They were nearly the same height. "Your file says you graduated from Jefferson Health 18 months ago," he said flatly. "That is correct." "It also says you have 0 prior clinical hours." "Also correct." His eyes bored into hers. "That needle decompression is textbook CCC. They don't teach that in civilian nursing programs. And that wound packing technique is a Tier 1 skill. I've only ever seen JSOC medics do that." The silence stretched on, the only sound the steady beep of the heart monitor. 2 hours earlier, everyone in this room had declared Jack Harris a lost cause. Lena held Reynolds's gaze, then looked back at Jack. "He needs a surgeon within the next 4 hours. That field dressing is not going to hold his subclavian," she stated, "and his lung needs to be monitored. I want his breath sounds checked every 30 minutes. Reynolds didn't contest it. "Paging thoracic," he said, turning, then stopping at the exit. He spoke without turning his head. "Good eye on the chest, Foster." From him that was high praise, not an apology. Lena pulled a chair over, assessing the wreckage of Jack's face, ashen and bruised, but alive. The man was, impossibly, still alive. His hands rested slack on the sterile white sheets. A sharp white scar on his right hand spoke of some brutal history. Her own expression was a careful void. She sat with her hands clasped, her eyes fixed on the steady rhythm of his heart on the monitor. Outside the room, the controlled chaos of the ER flared up. But here, there was only the hum of equipment, the man, and her. Her hand instinctively ghosted over her scrub pocket, finding it empty. It was expected. She hadn't used that particular instrument in ages, but the old reflex remained, a phantom itch. Jack's numbers held steady. He was alive by sheer, bull-headed will. His system just wouldn't quit. Lena kept her silence. After 15 minutes, a Dr. Cole came in. He was a young guy, maybe mid-20s, his face not yet worn down by the job. He carried a tablet, his curiosity practically radiating off him. "Thoracic is en route, ETA 40 minutes, he said. "Good," she answered, her voice flat. Cole hesitated, his gaze moving from Jack to her. "Can I ask you something?" he finally ventured. "You can. Reynolds told you to stand down. But you didn't. Why? His tone was cautious. Anyone else would have backed off. Lena inhaled slowly. Most people, she replied, her eyes locked on Jack, didn't see what was right in front of them. And what was that? A man who refused to die. Cole absorbed that with a nod and departed. Lena returned to her watch. She absorbed the details others would overlook, the scar, the set of his shoulders. Leaning forward, she rested her forearms on her legs and uttered one word, a whisper as faint as a breath. The word was for him alone. Falcon. A call sign, a password from another life. On the monitor, his heart rhythm jumped a tiny aberration, but it was there. The green line on the display pulsed with a renewed strength, as if some buried part of him had received the signal. Lena settled back in her chair, quiet. She simply waited for Sergeant Jack Harris to claw his way back. It was no movie scene, no sudden recovery. It was a marginal change in his vital signs. The trace on the screen firmed up, the beeps grew more confident, like a man deep in a hole hearing a familiar call. Lena saw it, and said nothing. She settled back in, her face an emotionless mask. She'd learned long ago that an expressive face was a tactical flaw. She had been waiting for 6 minutes when Marcus appeared in the doorway like an apparition. He didn't come in, just leaned on the door jamb with his arms crossed, watching her. He had the expression of a man whose understanding of the world had just been upended. "Reynolds needs a debrief in 20, he stated. "I'll be there," Lena confirmed. Marcus remained where he was, his gaze flicking between the monitor and her. "How did you know?" he asked. "The pneumo." His trachea looked centered. "It was off by 3 millimeters," she answered. "You have to know what to search for." "And you did." She met his eyes. "I did." He uncrossed his arms, then crossed them again, an obvious internal struggle playing out. "Where did you get your trauma experience?" "Your file claims, Jefferson." "They don't teach you to place a needle that fast there." Lena's gaze held steady. "It wasn't a standard rotation." "Unofficial?" Marcus said the word as if it tasted foul. "I'll be at the debrief in 20, she repeated. He studied her for another moment before he finally retreated. She could hear his steps receding down the hall. 41 minutes after she had spoken the call sign, Jack Harris's eyelids trembled. Not open, just a flicker, a sign of a man fighting his way back from the abyss. His scarred right hand twitched. The fingers flexed, grasping for a weapon that wasn't there. Lena moved closer. "Harris," she said, her voice quiet but firm. "You're stateside. Secure. Stand down." His head turned slightly. "Stay still," she commanded, her tone leaving no room for argument. The hand on the bed relaxed. His pressure was 88/54, dangerously low, but survivable. His respiration evened out. His oxygen saturation hit 91% and began to rise. His own body was joining the fight. To an outside observer, Lena looked perfectly composed, a carefully constructed lie. Inside, she was a dam holding back a flood. She had mastered this control in places where showing emotion was a death sentence. You just buried it, locked it down tight. You kept your voice even, your hands stable. You executed the mission. Later, in private, you might let it go. She believed that part of her life was over. She was wrong. Life, as she well knew, didn't care about your plans. Dr. Cole came back in 20 minutes with the thoracic surgeon. Dr. Evans was a woman in her 40s who carried herself like a master sergeant. Evans grabbed the tablet, evaluated the patient, then Lena, then Cole. "She's the one who placed the needle?" Evans inquired. "Yes," Cole confirmed. The next look Evans gave, Lena held a new quality. Not superiority, but mutual respect. "Good call," she stated. A few more minutes and his lung would have fully collapsed. This discussion would have been much shorter. "I'm aware," Lena said, A small, sharp smile appeared on Evans's face. "We're moving him to OR2 for a subclavian repair. His pressure must hold." She eyed the monitor. "Can he take it?" "Move him in 15, Lena said, "and he'll surge, then crash. He needs surgery before he bottoms out." Evans regarded her. "That's a bold call for a nurse." "On this, I'm certain," Lena replied. Evans turned to Cole. "Prep OR2, we're a go." Then to Lena, "Want to scrub in?" The question was a shock. Cole looked astonished. Lena's face remained neutral, but a brief, intense flash of hunger appeared in her eyes before she extinguished it. "I'm not credentialed," she said simply. "I read your file," Evans retorted. "I'm not asking about credentials. I'm asking you." The silence stretched for a moment before Lena rose. "Show me the scrub sink." The debrief with Reynolds was scrapped. As they moved Jack, the ER got slammed with a vehicle rollover and a soldier with chest pains pulling Reynolds back to the front line. Lena recognized the pace. Lulls were just intervals between engagements. The hospital was a combat zone. Complacency got you hurt. In the operating room, she stood just outside the sterile area, assisting Evans with clamps, suction, and vitals. She called out Jack's numbers with a steady confidence that made the tech glance at her twice. "Not your first crisis," he remarked. "I've been downrange," Lena replied quietly. He assumed she meant the military, and she let him. The tech, a man in his 30s, gave a sharp nod and turned back to his equipment. Evans worked with the precision of a bomb tech, clamping the subclavian tear and a secondary bleeder. She scanned the chest, her focus absolute. "There's old scar tissue here," she remarked. "Adhesions from a prior major injury." She gently touched the area. "Looks like he survived an untreated hemothorax recently." Her eyes met Lena's. "Do you know his history?" Lena's gaze remained on the surgery. "He's active special operations. His file is sealed." "Got it," Evans said, returning to her work. "Well, whoever patched him up before did it with spit and baling wire. The scarring shows brilliant battlefield triage." She paused. "Damn fine work." Lena remained silent, her grip whitening on a retractor. Sergeant Jack Harris was moved from OR2 at 1947 after 2 hours and 19 minutes of surgery. He was breathing unassisted, a fact Evans called a welcome surprise. His blood pressure held with a tenacity that the anesthesiologist, Dr. O'Malley, documented in his chart. They moved him to the surgical ICU on the 3rd floor. Lena escorted the gurney to the elevators and stopped. She'd been working for 13 hours. Her shift was over 2 hours ago. She had no standing in the SICU. She shouldn't get on that elevator. She pressed the buzzer for access. The SICU contained 4 beds and 2 isolation rooms for critical patients. Jack was in Private Room 1, a glass box filled with monitors that resembled a tactical command center. The charge nurse, Gloria, a woman with the steady presence of a gunnery sergeant, checked Lena's ID. "Day shift," she observed. "I know," Lena said. "You're the one who called the pneumothorax. Roger." Gloria appraised her, then gestured toward the room. "He's agitated. Not awake, but thrashing. Keeps dislodging his lines. We've had to restrain him twice." "He's stubborn," Lena commented. "They often are," Gloria said. "It doesn't always help." She returned to her desk. "You can go in, but don't touch anything without my approval." Lena entered the room. Encased in tubes and wires, Jack Harris was a battleground between recovery and collapse. His skin tone had improved. The awful grey was gone. His own breathing established a rhythm, taking over from the ventilator. She watched from a chair, her hand once more drifting to a pocket that held nothing. She stilled, her hand covering her own heart. "Stubborn ass," she murmured. His wrapped hand convulsed on the sheets, grasping at nothing. Her hand covered his, a connection, not a comfort. The fidgeting ceased, though he was lost to it. The monitor's beep became a truce. A sharp rap on the glass. "Reynolds wants you," the charge nurse called. Lena pulled back, scanned his vitals on pure instinct, and headed out. In the hall, Reynolds was in his greens, looking like a grunt fresh from a firefight. The battle of the day was carved around his eyes. "Walk with me," he ordered. They moved past the busy station to the dead-end corridor. He stopped at the window, facing her. "Hands in his pockets," he said. "I ran your file." She knew he would. "It's clean. Top marks. Perfect reports. Civilian trauma experience. Not a single flag." "It's a solid file," she agreed. "A file that explains nothing about a chest dart in under 45 seconds," he countered. "Or instincts Park called the best in 5 years." His voice lowered. "This is deep background. It didn't happen. It never gets written up. Ever." She stood her ground. "My question is this," he nodded toward Harris's room. "Is he your guy?" All the sound in the hospital just faded away. Her answer was surgical. "No conflicts with my current duties." He searched her face, giving nothing away, then nodded sharply. "Go rack out, Foster. Be on deck at 0700. She remained at the window, glass cool against her palm. A Humvee idled in the lot below. A ghost under the orange lamps. A ghost of her past. Her hand dropped. Back in the SICU, Gloria just lifted an eyebrow. "Soon," Lena promised. The veteran nurse looked at Harris, her composure cracking just for a second with worry. For 11 years, Gloria had been a fixture here, a guardian through long nights. She passed Lena a cup of sludge-black coffee. Lena accepted, returning to her vigil by the rhythmic machines. Time, 21:47, noted by reflex. Harris uttered something. Not a breath, but the echo of a word clawed up from somewhere deep inside. She was over him in a heartbeat. Harris. His lids trembled, fighting their way up from a drowning dark. "Harris," she repeated, her voice an anchor in the fog. "You're back home. You're out of surgery." A shattered sound left his lips, but the meaning was clear to her. It was perfectly clear. Shadow. Not a name, a call sign. A ghost identity from a server a world away. A name buried for 2.5 years. The knot of fear in her throat was instantly dismantled. Leaning close, she whispered for his ears only, "I'm on station. You're secure. Stand down." His hand twitched. She grabbed his hand. He gripped back. Gloria appeared at the door. Lena flashed a curt hand signal. "Hold position." The nurse didn't move a muscle. The grip was faint but intentional, not just a spasm. He was surfacing, fighting for purchase. His eyelids strained to open again. They shot open. Stormy grey eyes, fogged with drugs and the trauma of transit. They swept the room, then zeroed in on her. The haze was still there, but recognition cut through. Something primal. "You're Kilo India Alpha," he rasped, his voice like grinding stones. "Affirmative," she said. "You're here," he stated, a verification. "I'm here." He closed his eyes, not retreating, but securing his ground. He didn't release her hand. Gloria entered, her routine movements now tinged with a new respect. Her quiet exit and the soft click of the door were deafening. For 40 minutes she sat, waiting until his vitals leveled off. His grip went slack, and her instincts confirmed he was clear of danger. Then she moved. She squared her scrubs, scanned his sleeping face one last time, and exited. An elevator arrived. As the doors closed, she exhaled a single, heavy breath. While she descended, Sergeant Jack Harris remained upstairs, breathing. She got 4 hours and 40 minutes of rack time, not enough, but her training woke her with a jolt at 0517. Waking up was instant, a system restart. For 30 seconds she lay still, mapping the morning noises, the hum of power, gurney wheels, a distorted voice on the PA. The sounds were a familiar grid, a space where she could operate. She was up, cold water, clean scrubs, then up the fire escape to 3. Gloria was there. They had survived the night. The fire door clicked. Gloria glanced up, registered Lena, then went back to the monitor and her steaming coffee. A creature of habit, a pro. Lena headed for room 1. Lena paused at the door's window. Jack was awake, immobilized by tubes and exhaustion, but his eyes were alert, scanning. His right hand rested deliberately over his heart. He'd been watching the door. "Still here," he rumbled, his voice stronger. "The meds were working." "I was off duty," she said. "But you came back. Shift starts at 7. She sat, her eyes instinctively flicking to the monitor. BP 94/61, pulse 68. Trending up. It was the only direction that counted. He caught her look, a ghost of a smile appearing. Still doing it. Doing what? Recon. Their eyes locked. Pain level? Tolerable. Means it's bad, she translated. He stared at the ceiling. It's bad, he admitted, but I've had worse. I know. The silence was full of what they both remembered. He looked at her again, his expression raw, just 12 hours past death's door. The usual armor was gone, leaving just a man trying to reboot. How long? Are you stationed here? Metro Health. Started yesterday. His expression changed, not surprised, just re-evaluating the terrain. Day 1, he confirmed. Roger. And they tossed you in the ER. Standard procedure for the FNG. He held her gaze. And I was your objective. You were the objective, she confirmed. The silence grew. Lena, he said, the odds. Impossible, she said. And yet, here we are. He exhaled slowly against the pain. This isn't a coincidence, he said. No, she replied. It's irrelevant. You're functional. That's the only variable that counts. His jaw clenched as he worked the angles. She met his stare and waited. You used my call sign, he finally stated. In the ER. I used your name, she countered. My sign, he insisted. Heard it through the noise. No one here knows that handle. Just like no one here knows you were ever in the field. Their eyes locked on the shared, unspoken fact. He shut his running scenarios, his mind escaping his body. His fingers twitched. He mouthed, When? When what? Get out. 2.5 years ago, she said. His eyes opened. The program. Affirmative. The program. The protocol for making operators disappear. A scrubbed record. Her own exit involved 3 handlers. Jack's knowledge proved his clearance level. They retired you, he stated. I requested removal, she corrected. Different things. Why? She looked from her hands to his face. I was becoming too effective, she said, becoming something I couldn't be. He accepted it without question. He had seen it before. He just knew. Anyone here know? Negative. Reynolds, the CO, is smart. He won't poke around. For now, Jack echoed. For now, silence. Then, I have a sit rep. Her focus narrowed instantly. Her posture went rigid. The convoy, Jack said, his voice now a debriefing drone. It wasn't a random IED. Jack, rest. His hands shifted, gripping the bed rail, weak but resolute. It was an ambush. Pure and simple, he rasped. 3 kill boxes across a 4-click stretch. They knew our route, our schedule. He took a ragged breath. They had our goddamn roster. A cold dread settled in Lena's stomach. Her face remained an impassive mask. It was a setup. A complete burn, he corrected, his voice strained. They had our CAS window down to the microsecond. His desperate eyes found hers. I lost 3 of my boys. Lena. The rat gave them the grid. Your after action is in, right? Sent a flash report before we were wheels up, he grated. But there's a problem. She waited. Someone on my report's distro, he said carefully, is above my pay grade. Someone who can bury this entire operation. Lena didn't move. The monitor kept a steady, rhythmic beep. A medical cart clattered past, a sound from another world, completely detached from the debrief happening inside. "You picked here and now for this?" she asked. "It's now because some fool bird could be here for my official report any minute," he retorted, his gaze sharp. "Besides, you're the only one in this entire hospital who doesn't officially exist." The weight he just handed her felt like a blow to the gut. She absorbed the scene, him, the machines, the web of tubes keeping him breathing, and she saw it all. She considered the quiet existence she had so meticulously built. Now it was fracturing. "Who's got eyes on you?" she pressed. "The medics? The command post? And the brass they report to? Which could be the same snake in the grass you're looking for?" His look confirmed it. In a single, smooth motion she was on her feet, the choice made. Asterisk. "You have to get back in the fight. Asterisk," she told him with her eyes. Asterisk. "Get your numbers up. System online. You can't do that if you're circling the drain. Asterisk, asterisk. So you will lock it down and get some rack time." "That is an order." Asterisk, her mind snapped, sharp as surgical steel. Asterisk. "You activated me. I'm on it. But I can't run this op if you're a liability. Stay put. Let the body do its work." Asterisk. He locked eyes with her for a long moment, then finally conceded with the agonizing slowness of a man losing an internal war. "You always did have that command presence," he whispered. "Rest," she said again. He complied. She stood by until his breathing evened out, about 3 minutes later. She left the room with a measured, unreadable stride, her professional face cemented in place. At the nurse's station, Gloria was handing off to the day shift lead, Daniel, a man whose composure was earned over 20 years in this building. He spotted Lena leaving room 1. "You look like you need a caffeine 4. I need a standalone terminal," she said. Daniel considered her. "We've got workstations. An air-gapped one," she clarified, "isolated from the hospital net." He sized her up. "Admin has one on the 3rd floor for sensitive records. Reynolds has to authorize it." "I'll get it," she stated. She took the stairs, finding Reynolds in his office at 0649. He'd either been here all night or was in before sunrise. Both were par for the course for the man in charge of the trauma wing. Coffee on his desk, he was studying a wall of charts. He glanced up when she entered, his expression braced for trouble, just not this early. "Foster," he acknowledged. "I need access to the annex station on 3, she said flatly. He set down his mug. "That station is for classified patient data." "Roger that," she replied. "It's coded to my access card." "I'm aware," he observed her. The sterile morning light reflected off the grey in his hair and the lines etched from a lifetime of hard calls. He was precisely what he appeared to be, a man who'd spent 30 years where life and death were decided with a flawless instinct for the real threat. "Does this concern Harris?" he questioned. "This is a patient security matter," she deflected. "That's not an answer, Doctor." "Reynolds," she held his gaze, "I need that access. I can't give you the why, and you're sharp enough to know that's the whole point. I'm calling in the marker I earned yesterday." Silence filled the room. Reynolds picked up his mug, then put it back down. He clicked his pen. For a man like him, each click was a negotiation. He unlocked a drawer, sliding a keycard across the polished wood. She took it. "Whatever is happening," he said, his voice low, "you're on my turf here. If my people are exposed, I'm the first to know." "Understood," she confirmed. "In the data annex, She was in and out in under 6 minutes. She wasn't a cyber warfare tech, but she knew how to recognize the contours of intel in the shadows, to see its shape without a trace. At 0658, that shape revealed a clear-cut betrayal. Jack's team was on a black op, their plans secured by top-level encryption. The route was locked down 72 hours out, sent to 7 need-to-know recipients. 7 people had the full op plan. The hit was surgical. The traitor had the original file. She pulled up the distribution list, and the name was sitting right there. For a full 30 seconds she was frozen. Then she erased her digital signature. She put the card away and made her way back to the 3rd floor, to the same window where Reynolds had just cornered her. Her palm met the cold glass, a phantom of the previous night. She breathed deep. The name on that file wasn't some green second lieutenant. This wasn't a problem to be fixed. It was a name that made senior officers choose their words very carefully, and that name now knew Harris was alive, which gave them a grid coordinate to his bed. She pulled her phone, glanced at the screen, then put it away. She took it out again. The contacts were for a nurse named Lena Foster. That person didn't have the contacts needed for this. She'd torched that life 2.5 years back. She gave the ghost a final look and powered it off. She did a quick tactical assessment. The hospital. The doctor's fragile allegiance. A locked ICU with one way in, run by a charged nurse with a combat vet's intuition who knew a friendly building could turn into a kill zone. She had Harris breathing, and she had herself. It had been enough in the past. She moved from the window and headed back to the SICU. At 0714, Marcus found Lena at a different desk, her focus on Jack's chart a stone wall. He walked up to her. "Roster says you're in the pit." "I'm assigned here this morning," she replied without looking at him. "The ER is a war zone, Lena." Her gaze snapped to his, her tone pure business. "You knew something was wrong yesterday. You felt it before the bird even spooled down, and you know I'm not some boot." He was silent. "I'm not asking for the whole picture," she said. "I'm asking you to trust your instincts. No matter what else is happening, he's breathing because of what I did, and I need to stay on him." Marcus's gaze shifted from her face to the chart, then to the window of room 1. Inside, Jack was still, his vitals just data on a screen. "I'll cover your pitch shift till noon," Marcus stated. "After that, I need a situation report, asterisk. You'll get one by 1200, asterisk," Lena promised herself. He gave her one last, searching look before heading for the elevator. It was 0722. Lena started charting, her notes flawless, a perfect cover. As her hands worked, her mind was a TOC, wargaming the name. She calculated the threat, knowing full well what happened to soldiers who blew the whistle on the brass. At 0731, the SICU doors slid open. Daniel, his handoff done, was leaving. He paused by her desk. "Floor's quiet," he reported. "Harris in 1 needs watching. BP's creeping up. Labs at 0800 and a chest film before 0900. Roger that. You sure you've got this?" "It's handled," she repeated, her tone shutting him down. He gave a short nod and left. The ward was still. Lena moved with purpose, checking her other patients, updating the resident on duty at 0745, then pulling Jack's labs. "You get him?" he rasped as she handled the vials. She didn't break focus. "That's need to know." "So that's a yes," he pressed. "It means hold fast," she countered. He searched her face. "How high up?" She sealed a tube, their eyes meeting. "Manageable." He knew the word. A faint smirk touched his lips. "Using my own lingo against me?" Learned it from some hard-headed jarhead, she shot back, closing her kit. "Rack out. That's an order." She started to go, but froze. "Jack." "Good of you to be here. A tense beat passed. His voice was like gravel. Right back at you. The door slid shut. At 08:47, a message from the front desk pinged like an alarm only Sergeant Miller could hear. "I've got a man at the main desk," Priya said. "Says he's with Harris's team. He wants to see the attending." Lena's hand clenched the receiver. "What's his rank?" she asked. "Didn't give one," Priya answered, her voice tight. "He just flashed his credentials and asked for the doctor." "Get Reynolds on the line," Lena ordered. "Now. And that man stays on the ground floor. Roger, is this just get Reynolds?" Lena said, killing the line. Through the glass, she saw Jack's eyes were open. His gaze was fixed on the ceiling tiles, his frame rigid, the raw instinct of a grunt sniffing out an ambush. His gaze met hers across the room. She held up a flat hand, the universal signal to hold position. He gave a slight nod. Lena dialed Reynolds and said 6 words in a dead-level voice. "He does not get on this floor." To her deep relief, Reynolds didn't push back. He didn't question, ignoring the vast gap in their ranks. "Time?" was all he asked. 20 mics, she shot back. "Make it 15, he said, cutting the line. She was already moving. Jack's gaze was pure combat focus. "Visitor, first deck," she said. "Figured. No insignia, just an ID. He's asking for Doc Reynolds and you." A muscle in his jaw jumped. "Who is he?" Priya came up empty. She leaned in. "Keep your head on a swivel." The manifest listed 7 men. 4 were mine, he stated. 3 were officers. She pointed. The op was signed off by a Colonel Richard Voss. A look she'd never witnessed before hardened his features. She knew his look in combat, the fury and the fear, but never, in all their years, had she seen him turn so pale, so fast. His face was ashen. "Say the name again," he ordered. "Voss," she confirmed. His signature authorized the whole thing. Jack's eyes closed tight. When he looked at her again, they were arctic voids. "Voss has been my commanding officer for 14 months. His voice was quiet. "I know that. He was in the route briefing." "I know," she repeated. He looked up, his knuckles white on the bed frame. 3 of my Marines." The word was an empty echo. "Reyes, Okafor, Tillman." The names were a eulogy. "Danny's kid is 4. The rail cried out under his grip. "Voss offered me condolences at the funeral." His gaze locked on hers, the room feeling smaller. "Confirm it. Is that Voss downstairs?" Jack struggled upright. "If it's him, he's not here for my health." "I agree," she said. "But you're safe in here." "He won't try anything here," she stated. "He's just verifying the target is down. The real move comes after." Jack's focus shifted inward, running threat scenarios in his mind. She saw her own detached calculation mirrored in his gaze. "Get a visual confirmation," he commanded. "Reynolds bought us 15 mics. Down to 12. Move out," was his only reply. She was gone. At the nurse's station, she messaged Priya. "The guy at reception," she whispered. "I need eyes on confirmation." Low profile. A moment passed before Priya's reply came, her voice calm to mask the tension. IDs on his left lapel. "I have visual. Hold. 9 seconds stretched into eternity. Confirmed. It's Voss. Colonel Richard J. Voss. Lena, he's got backup." "A civilian suit. Looks like a heavy." Lena's fist tightened. "Where's Reynolds?" "Reynolds is stalling, keeping the colonel busy. It's buying you seconds." "Good." Voss is getting antsy. "Just 1 more minute," Lena urged. "Create a distraction, something believable." A pause. "On it. Appreciate it." "Thanks," Lena said, cutting the connection. 11 minutes on the clock. The next 8 were a whirlwind. Inside a supply room, she grabbed her tool. It wasn't a firearm, not even close. It had been 2.5 years since she was armed, but this would work. Returning to the station, she grabbed Jack's file, pretending to record his morning vitals, a picture of normalcy. The elevator chimed. She didn't look up from the file. Doors slid open. 2 pairs of shoes on the linoleum. Then a voice she didn't know, thick with the command of someone who expected instant compliance. The same voice from the intelligence brief. "I'm looking for Sergeant Harris, room 1, Voss announced. "I'm his C." Lena met his gaze. He was in his 50s, with the kind of stone-cut face made for official photos. The dress blues were a deliberate play for dominance, to control the space. His companion, younger, had the vacant, alert stare of a bodyguard. Reynolds was a few paces back. Lena capped her pen. "Colonel Voss? I'm Lena Foster, the sergeant's nurse." He scanned her once, uninterested. "I'm here to see my man," he stated flatly. "Of course. He's 18 hours out of surgery. His condition is stable, but fragile. I need the surgeon's sign-off for any visitors who could cause agitation." Voss's face was granite. "I am not a source of agitation. I will see him now." "I understand your position, sir," Lena answered. Her voice was professional, a defensive wall. "Hospital policy for his condition mandates the head surgeon's approval for non-kin visits. Dr. Reynolds can confirm." She glanced at Reynolds, who took the handoff flawlessly. "It's standard for all thoracic surgery patients in the SICU," he said, resolute. "A quick exam is required before I can clear visitors." Voss eyed him coldly. "My clearance overrides your rules." "That may be, Colonel," Reynolds countered, his tone firm. His voice carried the weight of 30 years of critical decisions. "But this unit is my command. That man is my responsibility, and here medical authority is the only one that counts." He didn't break eye contact. "My assessment will take 10 minutes. Please wait in the seating area." The time was 09:41. Voss complied. He stood by the unit doors, arms clasped behind him, his expression a blank mask. The suit was a shadow at his side. Lena returned to her paperwork. Inside room 1, Reynolds was performing the exam, but Lena knew it was cover for a conversation with Jack. She couldn't hear the words. But Reynolds was no fool. The last 22 hours, her behaviour, her computer logs, the call it added up. He had the pieces. She was gambling her life that he'd assemble them correctly. At 09:49, Reynolds emerged. He went to the desk, picked up a different file, and jotted something down, deliberately not looking at her. "There will be no visitors at this time," he announced, projecting his voice for Voss's benefit. "His BP is spiking. I need to observe him for an hour without any external stress." Voss moved closer. "Doctor, that is an order." Reynolds met his gaze. His expression was neutral. "Colonel, I recognize your authority and appreciate your presence. However, Sergeant Harris is my patient, and my clinical judgment is absolute. It does not answer to the military." He set the file down. 60 minutes. If his vitals improve, a brief visit can be scheduled. The waiting room is down the corridor. A heavy silence lasted for 4 beats. "Take me there," Voss commanded. Lena rose. "Follow me," she said, guiding him away. His minder shadowed them. They walked like a silent, formal escort. Lena pushed open the door to a small conference room. "Coffee? Water?" she asked. "No," Voss cut her off. He entered, his man at his heels. Lena let the door close and returned to the station. Reynolds stood at the station, his back to the hall, his voice low. He wanted to know if Harris was coherent, clear-headed enough to give a statement. "I figured as much," she murmured. "His guy was on the phone as you were walking away." "He was on it for maybe 30 seconds," Reynolds noted. Ice formed in her gut. "It's more than enough time." "Enough for what?" he pressed. She locked her eyes on his. This was the precipice. The final crossing. "What I'm about to tell you," she said quietly, "is going to burn your entire world down. Once you know, you can't unknow it. Your career will be over." Her stare was unwavering. "This is your last chance to bail. I'll see it through alone." He studied her for a long, silent moment. "Brief me," was his command. She gave him the whole ugly story, the ambush, the doctored intelligence, the hit list, and the real objective, and the colonel in the waiting room, there to confirm the job was done. Reynolds's expression was blank, but his eyes told the story. Disbelief, then rejection, then the crushing weight of the truth, hardening into a resolve she recognized as her own. He was silent for a full minute. "We need to get Harris out," Reynolds said, his voice devoid of emotion. "Agreed. Not just another room. Out of this hospital." "I know. I can authorize a medevac to Belvoir," he said. 40 clicks away. "We have medical justification. The chest tube is legitimate. Wheels up in 1 hour." She was floored, completely blindsided. She'd expected an ally, not a partner in crime. He was diving into the inferno right alongside her, accepting all the risk. "Do you understand the line you're crossing?" she pressed. "I'm moving a patient to a facility with superior care," Reynolds stated. "It is my responsibility." "But," she started. "It is my sworn duty," he cut in, his voice iron, "and it's medically necessary. He needs the transfer." "Give me 30 minutes to get the flight arranged," he said. "Your job is to keep Voss busy until that helicopter is spooled up." "He won't move for 30, she promised. Her mind was a whirlwind of calculations. The handler, the call time was running out. She assessed her assets, the hospital's maze-like corridors, and the single weapon she could wield with precision: the truth. A well-placed fragment of it would immobilize Voss better than any security detail. She headed back to the meeting room. She rapped once and entered. Voss was staring out the window. His handler, who'd been using his phone, snapped to attention, the device disappearing. "I apologize for the delay, Colonel," Lena began. Voss's posture shifted entirely. It wasn't friendliness. She doubted the man was capable of it. It was a strategic shift, reacting to a new element on the board. "For what?" he asked. "The delay," she said, sitting opposite him, uninvited. Her fingers formed a steeple, her expression one of clinical detachment. "Sergeant Harris asked me to hold you back." Voss went rigid. "He's been awake since 0600. He's lucid. But when I said you were here," he requested a moment. "The man's not right," she said directly. "I don't have the op details, Colonel, but it's weighing on him. He knew 3 of the KIAs. A flicker in Voss's eyes, a micro-tell she logged instantly. She missed nothing. "He's a Marine," Voss stated, his voice flat. "He is," she agreed. "And they don't air their laundry. They see it as weakness." The quiet stretched. "Just give him some space." "I'll take you in." Voss's eyes sharpened. His stare was a physical pressure. "This man is too important to you," it said. "I'm just thorough," her own glare countered. "First week," he observed. "A test." She didn't bite. "That's correct. And you're personally overseeing this frogman's case. I was lead surgeon. He's my patient, which gives me a tactical advantage," she added. After a long calculating look, Voss leaned back. "You have 15 minutes." "Understood," she replied, standing. "I'll get you when he's ready." She exited with a controlled gait, her face a blank slate. The second she rounded the corner, she broke into a run. Destination: Room 1. Inside, Reynolds was briefing Jack, speaking low and fast, a datapad in his hand. Jack's eyes locked on Lena the instant she entered. "Time? 15 minutes, max. Reynolds is handling the extraction. Belvoir is the destination. Reynolds cut in. Specialist is on standby. The orders are being processed." He faced Jack. "Can you manage a 40-minute transport?" Jack looked to Lena. His vitals are stable. She checked the chest tube dressings. If we clamp the drain and he stays immobile, the risk is acceptable. Your definition of acceptable? Jack countered. Better than being a stationary target, she shot back. Their gazes locked. It's a go. Reynolds moved out, silent and fast. As Lena secured his lines for the 40-minute ride, Jack started. The guy with Voss. Young, in dark civvies. Not a Marine? Jack said. Not current. Anyway. Stance is off, but he's trained. The way he watched the exit. He's a contractor. Voss brought in a spook, Jack concluded. Lena processed the intel, her hands never faltering. So Voss is off the reservation. Which means he's spooked, Jack stated. Men like him only hire mercs when they're scared. His voice hardened. He knows, I know. He can't know the whole story, Lena said. He has to plan for the worst case, Jack replied. Which this is. 10:23. 11 minutes gone. Marcus entered. Marcus, I need you, Lena said immediately. Figured, he answered. Get to the consult room. Tell the colonel that Reynolds needs him on deck 2 for intake paperwork. Standard procedure, a complete lie. Buy me 6 minutes. Marcus glanced between them. You promised you'd explain by noon, she said. It's 10:23, he replied. I'm aware. The tension was thick. He squared his shoulders, adjusted his credentials, and left, the very picture of routine, a perfect play. Lena exhaled, refocusing. You trust him, Jack noted. I trust my monitors, she corrected. That's it. 10:31. At the window, Reynolds held up 5 fingers. 5 minutes. She turned to Jack. When the team arrives, do not move. Do not resist. Don't even twitch. I know the procedure, he snapped. It's not in your nature, she countered. A ghost of a smile touched his lips, sparking something she quickly extinguished. Lena, he said her name, like a memory. What's the mission after Belvoir? 1 step at a time, she deflected. That's not a mission. It's our only option, she replied. Finishing the last line, she took in the scene, the man, the machines, and the chest that refused to quit. After Belvoir, you recover, then we plan the next phase. Together. It was a promise. She met his gaze, thinking of the simple, quiet life she had built, a life contained by an ID badge, a locker, and an 0700 start time. She thought of the 2.5 years building that safe harbour. Then she pictured the name on the casualty report. Danny Reyes and his daughter, who would be 4 in October. Affirmative, she said. Together. 10:37. The transport team entered, all quiet purpose, treating Jack like a priceless asset. Down the hall, Marcus ran interference with bogus forms. Lena walked beside the gurney toward the service elevator, her hand inches from his, a silent vow not to let go. The elevator doors opened. She stepped in. The car dropped. Lena stood fast by the gurney, her hand on its rail, her eyes fixed on the team's monitors. She tracked his numbers, as she had since he'd been brought in. The data was the baseline, and the baseline was life. Blood pressure 96/62, pulse 71, sats holding at 93%. He stared at the elevator ceiling, but his eyes were working, running the same tactical scan as before, still mapping the threat. But beneath it, she saw something she recognized from her own past. The profound relief of clearing a kill zone, and the crushing weariness that came after. Your pressure is up 2 points, she said. I can feel it, he rasped. Good? Good, he confirmed. Feels like I'm still in the fight. The hatch opened onto the lower deck passageway. The detail was professional. 2 corpsmen, 1 tech, all focus. Lena stayed on Jack's 6. The hall led to the motor pool. A 42-second transit to the ramp, an automatic calculation. The ramp hit the ground, admitting the pre-dawn chill. Jack Harris was outside the wire, a world removed from the sterile bay. Lena felt him tense. "Cold," he grunted. "It's March," she said. "I own a calendar," he shot back. "Then don't complain." A faint smirk. Roger. They secured him and she climbed in. The lead corpsman, Torres, a bull of a man with faded ink, studied her ID. "You family?" Torres demanded. "Medical escort," she stated. "Not on the manifest." "The manifest was amended," she replied flatly. Torres met her gaze, then gave a curt nod. He knew when to stand down. He sealed the hatch. 10:44. The armoured transport rolled out of the compound. Back in the office, Marcus's time was up. He knew the play was over the moment Colonel Voss stood, his voice dangerously calm. "Your obstruction ends now." Marcus held his stare. "Sir, report." "Now," Voss commanded, the words laced with menace. Voss was certain it was a trap, and Marcus refused to spring it. Voss burst from the office, his shadow already on a satellite phone. He strode into the trauma bay, straight for stall 1. Through the glass he saw it. A stripped bed, blank monitors, gear on the floor. He froze for a full 4 seconds. He spun toward the duty desk. A young corpsman stared back, terrified. "The Marine! Stall 1! Where is he?" Voss snarled. "Medivase, sir," the kid stammered. "Wheels up about 15 minutes ago." "Destination?" Voss ground out. "It's all in the official orders, Colonel," Reynolds said, materializing in the doorway. In civilian clothes and holding a datapad, he radiated an authority that stopped Voss in his tracks. Backed by 30 years as a Navy doctor, he owned the space. "Landstuhl," Reynolds announced. "Thoracic consult. It's by the book and non-negotiable." He held out the datapad. The transfer was legit. Voss's rage turned to ice. Voss glared at the doctor, then at his contractor. A subtle shake of the head confirmed it. The asset was gone. "This is not over," Voss promised, the threat encompassing everyone in the room. Reynolds remained motionless. Voss spun on his heel and stormed away, his shadow close behind. When the elevator doors shut, the medbay breathed. Reynolds went to the comm station and dialed a secure line. After 3 rings, it connected. "Commander James Reynolds, Medical Corps," he identified himself. "Connect me to the Inspector General's office. I'm reporting a security compromise and lodging a formal complaint." The line went quiet for a moment. "Copy. I'll hold." While he waited, 40 kilometers down the road, Lena's burner phone came to life. A reply from a number she'd pinged at 0715. A ghost contact, dormant for over 2 years. The text, "Copy. In motion. Protect the asset." Lena read it and put the phone away. "Good news?" Jack asked. "Yes," she said. "The next phase has begun." "Whose phase?" "Someone well above Colonel Voss," she replied. "They were waiting for a green light." "That after-action report you filed," she started, "what was its distribution?" "Straight to the IG." "I went outside the chain," he said. "It was a gut feeling." "A damn good one," she confirmed. "Your report lit the match. The data I pulled makes the case irrefutable. It's solid." "Solid enough for what?" he asked. "To trap Voss permanently," she said. "His bosses can't make this disappear. Not with 2 independent, credible sources telling the same story." Jack stared into the streaking asphalt. Torres kept them steady at the wheel as the medic checked the oxygen. Just another day at the office. "Danny Reyes," he whispered. "Chris Okafor." "Mark Tillman." "I get it," Lena said softly. "It's for them," he choked out. "Not for command or some damn after-action report. For them." "I get it," she repeated. He gripped the sheet, and she placed her hand close, a silent anchor. Her calm in the ER, all business, completely solid. He offered his hand, she took it. at 11:22 hours. Landstuhl. The CSH was a well-oiled machine, ready for their arrival. The surgeon Reynolds sent, a man named Annan, waited on the tarmac. He had the quiet confidence of a pro. He took command of Jack's care with an authority that settled Lena's anxiety. She let him work. She kept her distance from the controlled frenzy, a quiet observer making sure the handover was seamless. Annan caught her eye. "You called the tension pneumothorax?" "Yes, sir," she confirmed. Annan checked the scans on the screen. "Sharp diagnosis," he commented. 20 more mics. He would have been dead." "I'm aware," she replied. "You staying?" he asked. Her eyes went to Jack, who was enduring it all in silence. For a while. In the hallway at 12:17, her burner vibrated. Not Sims. Unknown caller. Her reaction was pure muscle memory, a reflex from a past life. She centered herself and answered. "Foster," was all she said. "Miss Foster," a sanitized official voice replied, the type that lives in soundproof rooms. "Who I am doesn't matter. Your intel, corroborated by Sergeant Harris, was acted on at 11:45 local time." "And the timeline?" Lena asked. "Instant," came the reply. "The asset is confined to quarters. Public notification in 20 minutes. We're watching his controller too," Lena breathed out. "He's going to lawyer up." "Count on it," the voice said. "He'll get the top dollar attorneys, but our case is solid." A short pause. "Miss Foster, we know your history. Your current cover identity is not compromised." "Explain," Lena demanded. "It means Nurse Lena Foster shows up for her shift tomorrow. Your former file stays sealed, but what happened today is now official record." Another silence. "Thank you for your cooperation." The connection cut. Lena was still for a beat, then put the phone away and went back inside. His eyes found hers the moment she entered. Annan's people were gone. It was only Jack, wired to new monitors that showed a steady pulse. He had the look of a man who'd seen the other side and barely made it back. "So?" he asked. "It's done," she said. "Happened quick." His look told her to keep talking. "They pulled Voss from his post. A major investigation has been launched. It was the vindication he needed. The kind a Marine needs to know it wasn't for nothing. The names he spoke, Danny, Chris, Mark, weren't going to disappear into some blacked-out government folder. Justice was coming." His jaw clenched. His hand seized the bed rail, knuckles turning bone white. After a long silence, he finally said, "Okay." The word carried the weight of everything. "Okay," she echoed, drawing a chair nearer. The steady pulse of the heart monitor was the only sound. The battle was over, but the long war of recovery had just begun. "What about you?" Jack's voice was low. "What do you do now?" Her mind went to the hospital, the organized chaos of the trauma unit, Marcus's calm leadership, Priya's quick hands, and Reynolds, who'd risked his stripes for her. "I go back to work," she said simply. "That's all? You just go back?" "It's not just," she shot back, "but yeah." He watched her with those hard grey eyes. "And what's the objective for me?" he asked. "You recover." She spoke it like a mission parameter. "Annan's the top surgeon, and you're the most stubborn son of a bitch I've ever met. You survived yesterday, you'll survive this." She met his gaze. "After that, you'll be assigned a new mission. Just like the rest of us. And if my next mission is finding a woman named Foster?" The question was quiet, no theatrics, but it hit like a body blow. He was dead serious. She met his stare, her cover story suddenly feeling like paper armor. She remembered him, half-conscious, whispering her old call sign, and she remembered saying his first name in reply. "We can talk about that when you're not wired to a machine and full of donated blood," she parried. "You didn't say no," he noted. "No," she conceded quietly. "I didn't." A small smile touched his lips. At 13:48 her phone buzzed. It was Reynolds. She took the call in the corridor. "I just finished with the IG," Reynolds said, his tone even. "They've got my official statement. The inquiry is a go." "I'm tracking," she said. "Heard about 20 minutes back. Things are in motion." A pause. "You know people." "New people," she amended. "Some seem to remember me." "Lena," he started, and her name sounded different now. He sounded like a man who'd stepped over a lion and was calculating the fallout. "Is this going to cause blowback for my team?" "No." Her answer was final. This problem was specific to Corporal Harris. He brought it here. It didn't originate in our AO, and it stops here. "But you're the one in the hot seat," he pointed out. "Only until the investigation is complete. Then I'm clear too." Another pause. "Priya thinks you're some kind of spook," Reynolds said. A humorless laugh almost escaped her. "And your response?" "I told her you're a damn good nurse," he replied. "Because you are." "Yeah," she conceded. "That part's true." "We could use you," he added. "It's chaos in the ER." "I'll be there tomorrow morning," she said. 0700, he verified. 0700, she confirmed. Hanging up, she sagged against the wall and closed her eyes. The building's steady hum was a backdrop, uncaring of the turmoil inside its rooms. She allowed herself a single second to flash through the last 26 hours. Crackle of the radio, the Marine on the gurney, the sharp hiss of the needle that saved a life, a name spoken in a whisper, his hand holding hers, a key card, an encrypted call, and Marcus ready to throw down. 3 names, like spirits, breathed at the ceiling tiles while he gripped the rail. She let the image go. She pushed off the wall and went back in. He was out, his exhausted body finally winning the battle against his own stubbornness. He was breathing steadily, his right hand flat on the blanket, the scarred skin visible in the low light. She stood at the foot of his bed, watching the green line of his heartbeat. His chest rose and fell, his body's sheer grit refusing to quit. Reynolds was right, she was a hell of a nurse. But she was something else too, an old tool sharpened by years in the shadows that she'd tried to leave behind. Yesterday hadn't been her fight. She never looked for this war. She'd clocked in at Metro Health Military 6 minutes ahead of schedule, hoping for a quiet shift. Fate, as usual, had other plans. She was long past being surprised. She was done feeling bad about what she was built for. She pulled the chair closer and stood her watch. She was there at 0300 and there again at 04. When he woke at 0422 and found her there, she just held his gaze. His eyes locked on hers, the low hum of the room filling the silence as the day wound down. At 1717, a text came from her contact in Arlington. Just 2 words. Voss secured. She put the phone away and turned to Jack. "It's finished," she told him. He didn't move. She watched the news land, like a final, solemn note in the space where Danny, Chris, and Mark lived in his memory, the place where the images of Voss, the convoy, and the ambush were burned into his brain. She saw his jaw clench, his throat work, as he took in the end of it all. He wasn't pushing the pain away, he was facing it down. "Okay," he exhaled, the word a complete surrender. "Okay," she confirmed. She reached over, her hand covering his. He didn't have to bridge the gap this time. Lena Foster had clocked in as just a nurse. She clocked out as something else, something older and more complete than she'd felt in years. She was someone who knew you don't pick one life over the other. The nurse was real, the operative was real. They both existed for the same reason, to be the wall between decent people and the things that tried to hurt them. She'd done it yesterday with a chest tube and a few calm words. She'd do it again if she had to. And she would show up at Metro Health at 0700 on the dot, because that's who she was. All of her, with no regrets. The mission, whatever its form, was never really over. Only the battlefield changed. And Lena Foster had never been afraid of the terrain.